Things are looking less developed here, understandably, because we've not long put the squash and the pumpkins out. So really at this stage it's a game of keeping it all alive until it takes root and starts to develop, grows its own leaves since having been planted here from the polytunnel. So this is looking a bit sad, a bit floppy, so I might have to give that a bit of a water in a minute. Most of these are looking fine. The leaves that were on during the polytunnel period are turning a bit yellow because they're a bit shocked. This one particularly shocked, so I might have to replant here. If I look down, I'm getting some pretty strong damage from slugs, and over here you can see the new growth coming through, which is perfect. Same here and here. So it's just getting it over that barrier of being shocked by the cooler temperatures having come out of the tunnel. And then the courgettes, well, those four look really strong, and yeah, we've got some leaves dying back, but again, that's the shock. And this one, not so much. We seem to have quite a lot of damage here, so I might be replanting one of those. So 2 out of all of that I think might need a replacement. Not too bad, and we've got those replacements in the tunnel. Just need to put them in on a cooler day. So fingers crossed on all that. I think a water is in order, and watering these during the warmth is not a problem because I water down the tubes. It goes straight into the soil, so it's not like spraying onto the leaves in hot weather. So in the main growing areas, we've got the celeriac, which I'm really trying to get large plants, and they all look very well. What is going to be easy in there is weeding. There's a stinging nettle developing there and a couple of bits and bobs, but it'll be so simple to weed, and I can see how they're starting to bush out now, which is great. This is my favourite onion, Globo, which I've given pride of place, and they're seriously developing now, which is lovely to see. And hopefully we'll have some big onions to store. They certainly stored extremely well last year. Just sidetracked here by how well my dahlia is coming on. So that seems to be doing just fine. Swede, well, I'm already thinking too close together, but I did want smaller size swede, and I think that's what I'm going to get. They certainly develop lots of foliage, which is nice. Here we've got a couple of different onions. I think we've got Elsa Craig, and I think we've got some shallots. So they've all taken nicely and are developing well. Over here, a second bed of celeriac, same strategy, looking good. This was probably one of the first plants I put into the beds, which is beetroot, and they seem to be developing nicely. We grew a bit too much beetroot last year, so I'm just keeping it a bit under control. And this is a bit of a mix. This is where I was planting various things, and I had a few over, a couple of swedes, a couple of cabbage, just extras, but they look fine. And then into these 2 knitted hooped beds. This is the kale, Cabello Nero. It's actually called Toscana, but it's a Cabello Nero style kale. And it does get some serious height on it, so that's why it's in the taller one. And doing really well. A little bit of slug damage on those, but if they can get a bit of height on them, they seem to do absolutely fine. So these are broccoli, green-headed broccoli. So they look quite well. There's one that's had a bit of a bashing from slugs, but he might well recover. Otherwise, nicely spaced, plenty of room, and hopefully we'll get some developing heads on those. Cabbage went in early, or early for me, and wow, seriously developing. And I really messed up on this. I think I said when I planted it that it's greyhound. I'm convinced now that it's fielder kraut, and therefore that's a mighty big cabbage close together. So we'll have to see how that develops. I might end up taking some out to let others develop. We'll see. This is Ursa a Russian kale. It's like a red kale. Gets these lovely frilly leaves, and yeah, looking really healthy. And my tagetes experiment at the back, I seem to have about 5 or 6 plants left, and hopefully they'll develop, although bindweed, bindweed, bindweed and bindweed, and I'm reliably informed that they do have an effect on bindweed, but it does take a couple of years, so I don't know whether I've got that much patience. We'll see. This is an empty bed which I'm going to put that purple sprouting broccoli into. Hopefully they'll come on soon and we'll get them in there. And this is sprouts, and this is brilliant F1, and I replanted the two at the end because they got devoured by slugs, and put this gravelly grit around the base, and they do still seem to have got that first one there, but the others are doing okay. So who knows, might have 4 good plants, and I've got more over the other side which I'll show you in a bit. So here we are amongst the red currants. Now these bushes, wow, they're just enormous now, and I prune them every year, but they just do so well here. And look at the fruit on these, just laden. There's already some being picked off by the birds. I guess this warm weather is making them look for berries, but they're very green, so I am surprised. But we're certainly going to have an enormous crop of berries, which will be fantastic for those jams and jellies. And this bed is still empty, and of course that's where my parsnips are going to go. They're still coming on nicely. I've clipped them back now so that they're singles. This is saved seed of aqua dolce broad beans, and they're full of flowers, and touch wood, no sign of black fly yet. So let's hope it stays that way. Okay, runner beans. Well, they went in a bit early. It was a bit cool, so I was a bit anxious, but they do seem to have got that sort of stronger, greener colour that implies that they're well rooted and doing okay. The difficult bit is these down here, and they just get eaten by slugs. This one's got away, but this one, even the second one, has not worked out. There's plenty here, plenty of room for them to grow into the space that there might be at the end. But all of these have sent up their tendrils, and they seem to be looking very healthy now. So looks like we're going to have a good crop of runner beans, or green beans, whatever you call them in your part of the world. I keep having to put 1 or 2 of these round and round these poles. There we go, but they're doing fine. Well, it was a subscriber's idea to use this courgette bed, as it was, for onions because of the white rot that I get, and the fact that this had never had any onions grown in it before. Great idea, thank you. And this is a mixture of Ailsa Craig and, Bedfordshire Champion, Ailsa Craig, and some shallots. And they're all looking fine, really nice thick leaves on them. So I'm really hopeful for a great crop of onions this year, and store them through the winter, which is a great way of making your veg last longer. Did a serious pruning of this apple tree because it had a very long and drooping branch, very thick branch. So I decided I'd take it out in the interest of the shape of the tree, and the shape's good. I do think that pruning has impacted on the apple production. So you can see we've got a few apples here, odd ones and twos, which is interesting because this tree always had an awful lot of apples on it. In the last 2 years, I found myself having to thin them in the interest of getting a larger apple. So I'm hopeful that this year, it's obviously had an impact on it, pruning, which has resulted in less apples. So I'm hoping those apples will be that much bigger. We'll see. But it's a fair old sized tree these days. You know, the black currant bushes has been going on for a couple of years because this was a completely overrun and fairly ancient group of bushes. But I'm not seeing many black currants, and I don't know, I think I just got to leave this for a year and see how it gets on, because I think I've probably been hacking it too many years in a row to get it under control. Got a lot of weed growth in there this year, but we'll see. I think we'll leave that and see what it does over the next couple of years. Gardening is long term. Well, I'd say these are some of my most successful garlic on the plot at the moment. So these went in first, way back in probably late September, early October. They are lush and green. They've not produced scapes, and they're tall. They're looking very healthy indeed. And I think this sort of dapple shade down here really helps them. So who knows how they're going to compare when I start pulling things out, but I've got high hopes for them. Someone gave me some potatoes the other day. They had a potato that they thought was absolutely wonderful, and this is it. They said it was the best potato they've ever had for chips, and it's called Pierre-de-Terre. So yeah, don't know what they're going to be like, but they gave me them and they had chitted heavily, so I put them into these 3 small pots just to see if they could come on. It's very late, I think, to be putting unknown potatoes into pots, but we'll see. It's got 2 chances. Whereas these potatoes, which is my shallots, are really doing nicely. And we've had a lot of rain, and I think that's helped them tremendously. They've certainly leafed up and grown enormously, or at an enormous rate over the last 2 weeks. So fingers crossed that's going to result in a good crop of potatoes. Okay, second lot of Brussels sprouts. I only put these in, I think, probably a week ago, but it's very interesting. There's an awful lot of shade here from this huge amount of foliage from the black currants, and the shaded plants look so much more healthy than those that are bearing the heat of the sun. Just look at that, what a difference. These were smaller plants, to be fair, but they still don't look anything like as healthy as the ones that are in the shade. So a bit of a learn there for me. This might turn out to be a good spot, although I do need to keep that canopy of foliage back as we progress, and my canes are ready to go in to give them support, which I think they'll benefit from. And I did end up putting eggshell around here. We just had another batch of eggshell which we brought over from the house, so I thought this is a good place to invest that, and because it is a bit exposed and surrounded by a lot of foliage, and there is a bit of damage on some of these, but generally they're getting away, which is what you want. And as soon as they can get some height on them, the slugs, they're not great climbers. I wouldn't say they don't climb, but they're not great climbers. My Hugekultre bed is a real mishmash. I don't mind that. It feels like a sort of experimental bit of fun, and I do like a bit of fun on the plot. And this has got some volunteer potatoes in there, and we've put some coriander and some rocket, a little bit of parsley. Some things are doing really well, some not so well, but I don't mind. As long as it ends up giving us something, that'll be a bonus. I have put these 2 little gem squashes in here, and hopefully they will attach and climb up. And the rocket is really bolted, so that's not great. There's a couple of strawberries in there, and we'll see if they develop. Someone wrote in the comments, really you're better off growing rocket sort of late summer into the autumn, because it tends not to bolt then. So I'll give that a go. I think I do like rocket, and it certainly does bolt any other normal time of the growing season in my experience. So we've got some more garlic up here. This is doing well. This soil is not as good quality as the soil down in those pots that I've just shown you, but they seem to be doing okay, so I'm hopeful that we'll get a few garlic out of there. All in all, with the various lots of garlic I've got around the plot, I'm sure we'll end up with plenty. Take you around the back of the coop, show you my plum tree. This is comfrey, of course, which I haven't got a lot of. I tend to chop it back because it leans into the pathway. I also chop back all these currant bushes. All these red currants on these bushes, just, you know, this is really hedging as far as I'm concerned, but just look how much there is in the way of fruit on here. Fantastic. And around here you can see how the plums are doing, and they're developing nicely on these branches. So I'm really hopeful for a plum crop this year. It'd be fabulous. And what berry jam we don't manage to make may be replaced by Victoria plum jam. We'll see. Very little activity going on down in the composting area this time of year. Really, I just letting it sit in its bays, and you can just see how amazing the reduction in volume has been. I mean, I have had this compost heap above the sides of the bay 3 or 4 times, topping it up, and now the supply obviously has stopped because it's summer, and you can see it just shrink down. That's now half of what it was, and same with this one. Really getting much lower in the bays. This one has collapsed a bit, but again just shrinking down. But this will still be a huge volume of compost which will get spread across the plot when we get to the autumn months. This is my sort of spare nursery area, and things just tick over down here in case I need anything. I've got some raspberries, and we've got some rhubarb, and a few walking onions, as they're called, or Welsh onions. They may be different varieties, I don't know, but keep them down here just to, well, increase in number, because I only had a few, and we'll get those out probably next year now. I still haven't done anything with this mound of clay. I keep adding quite a bit of soil to this, because many people said you may have an issue if you just cap this whole area with clay, because the water drains down to here. It could result in all the water just pooling on top of it. So I just keep adding soil when I'm doing various projects, and there will come a time when I'm feeling energetic, and I'll take my Chillington hoe to this and spread it all out and level it. Well, my plot tour was too much for one video, as you will have gathered, so I hope you enjoyed part 2, and I'm just going to finish up by harvesting a few lettuce leaves. Mrs. K said she wanted about a dozen, but these are enormous, so might just do a few lettuce leaves. And it's lovely to have different varieties in the polytunnel that you can choose from. I'm going to get in there and get one of those. And then the other thing that she asked me for was some basil, so I'm going to take the tops off of some of this basil, and that'll be me done for the day. I always say when I harvest basil, if only you could have smell-o-vision. Well, hope you enjoyed part 2, as I say, and if you did, well, like and subscribe. You get my uploads if you hit the bell every Wednesday and every Sunday at 8 p.m. If you didn't see part 1, go back and watch it. Diolch yn fawr.